Alright, so in this video we're going to be doing a basic introduction to the alphabet that's used in Classical Syriac. Now we're not going to be learning the individual letters that make up the Syriac alphabet in this video, but what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at 8 basic facts about the Syriac alphabet that are going to help us understand the alphabet just a little bit better before we have to start learning the individual letters. So 8 basic facts about the alphabet that's used in Classical Syriac. Let's get right into it. So the first important thing to know about the alphabet that's used to write out Classical Syriac is that the Syriac alphabet is descended from the alphabet that was used to write out Imperial or official Aramaic. Now, one of the things that we talked about in a previous video is the fact that Classical Syriac is a late dialect of Aramaic. And in fact, we can even say that Classical Syriac as a language is a linguistic descendant of Imperial or official Aramaic. But not only is Classical Syriac as a language descended from official or Imperial Aramaic, the writing system that's used in Classical Syriac is also a descendant of the writing system that was used in Imperial or official Aramaic. Now, when you take a look at the alphabet that's used to write out Classical Syriac, at first glance, it doesn't really seem to bear much resemblance to the alphabet that was used to write out official or Imperial Aramaic. Now, part of the reason for that has to do with the fact that most of us who read Aramaic are used to reading Aramaic as it appears in printed editions of Aramaic texts. However, when you actually take a look at the way that the script appears in Aramaic manuscripts or in Aramaic inscriptions, we're able to see how one phase of the Aramaic alphabet is easily developed into the next phase of the Aramaic alphabet. So the chart that we have here on the screen definitely oversimplifies things. But when you take a look at the various forms of the Aramaic alphabet, we can see how one form of a letter could easily develop into the next form of the letter. So at the very top we have the first few letters of the Aramaic alphabet as they would appear in old Aramaic inscriptions. So these would be inscriptions that come from around 700 BCE. Now, the old Aramaic alphabet was simply borrowed from the Phoenician alphabet, basically exactly the same as the Phoenician alphabet. Now, when you compare that to the Imperial Aramaic alphabet, these letters look quite a bit different from each other, at least on the surface. However, when you compare these letters to each other vertically, we can see how one form of a letter could easily develop into the next form of the letter in many cases. The exact same thing is true when it comes to the Syriac alphabet. So at the very bottom we have one version of the Classical Syriac alphabet, which looks quite a bit different from the alphabet that we see in Imperial or official Aramaic. However, when you compare the letters to each other vertically, individually, we can see in many cases how one form of the letter could easily develop into the next form of the letter. So that's the first important thing to know about the alphabet that's used in Classical Syriac. It is descended from the alphabet that was used in Imperial or official Aramaic. So the second important thing to know about the Classical Syriac alphabet is that the alphabet that we use in Classical Syriac is actually distantly related to the alphabet that we use today in English. Now that might seem surprising or a little bit unbelievable because these alphabets seem so different from each other. However, when we trace their origin back to where these alphabets originally came from, we can see that there's actually a distant relationship between the Classical Syriac alphabet and the alphabet that we use today in English. So if you take a look at the chart that we have on the screen, we can see that the alphabet that we use in Classical Syriac and the alphabet that we use in English today ultimately derive from a common ancestor. And the common ancestor that both alphabets ultimately derive from is the Phoenician alphabet. So if we take a look at this branch of the family tree, we can see that the old Aramaic alphabet was borrowed from the Phoenician alphabet. In fact, the old Aramaic alphabet is identical to the Phoenician alphabet. We can see that the Imperial Aramaic alphabet is a development from the old Aramaic alphabet, and the Syriac alphabet is ultimately a development of the Imperial Aramaic alphabet. We take a look at the other branch of the family tree, we can see that the Greek alphabet derived from the Phoenician alphabet, the Etruscan alphabet was derived from the Greek alphabet, and the Latin alphabet was derived from the Etruscan alphabet. And the English alphabet is basically the Latin alphabet, developed a little bit and adjusted to the sounds that we have in English today. So even though Classical Syriac looks quite a bit different from the alphabet that we have in English today, both of these alphabets are related to each other. They have a common ancestor. Both are ultimately developed from the Phoenician alphabet. So what practical difference does that make? Well, it doesn't make much of a difference on a practical level, but it can help you when it comes to memorizing the sequence of the alphabet in Classical Syriac, because some of the letters that we have in Classical Syriac match the sequence that we have for the English alphabet. And again, it's ultimately because both derive from the Phoenician alphabet. So we have two sequences here. The first one is JKLMN, matches exactly with what we have Yod, Kaf, Lamed, Mim, Nun. And then we have QRST, matches entirely with Kof, Resh, Shin, and Tau. And if you also happen to know the Greek alphabet, knowing the Greek alphabet will also help you with memorizing the sequence of the alphabet in Classical Syriac. So at the very beginning of the alphabet, we have the letter Alpha corresponding to Aleph, Beta corresponding to Beth, Gamma corresponding to Gamel, Delta corresponding to Daleth. We have no epsilon. Zeta corresponding to Zain, there's no eta. Theta corresponding to Taith. Yoda corresponding to Yoth. Kappa corresponding to Kaf. Lambda corresponding to Lamed. And Mu corresponding to Mim. And Nu corresponding to Noon. And it goes on from there in the Greek and Classical Syriac alphabet. And of course, if you happen to know Hebrew, the sequence for the alphabet in Hebrew is identical to the sequence of the letters that we have in Classical Syriac, except for one letter that is present in the Hebrew alphabet that does not occur in Classical Syriac. So that's the second important thing to know about the Classical Syriac alphabet, that even though it looks quite a bit different from the alphabet that we have in English, they are related to each other because they share a common ancestor. The third thing that we need to know about the Syriac alphabet is that the Syriac alphabet is the form of the Aramaic alphabet that was used in the city of Edessa, which was known in Syriac as Urhai. Now, Edessa is located in what is today southeastern Turkey, near the border of Syria. But back at the beginning of our era, it was at the very center of an Aramaic-speaking kingdom that would eventually end up being absorbed into the Roman Empire. But before it was absorbed into the Roman Empire, it had adopted Christianity as its official religion at a very early date. And because of the influence that Edessa had in Aramaic-speaking Christian circles, the dialect of Aramaic that was used in Edessa, which was Classical Syriac, and the alphabet that was used for the dialect that was used for Aramaic in Edessa ended up spreading far and wide in Aramaic-speaking areas that had been influenced by Christianity. So the alphabet that we have for Classical Syriac is the form of the Aramaic alphabet that was used in and around the city of Edessa, and it ended up spreading because of the influence that Edessa had on Aramaic-speaking Christianity. The fourth important thing to know about the Syriac alphabet is that there are actually 3 different scripts that can be used to write out the Syriac alphabet. Now, all of these alphabets are variations of the same alphabet, but they're different enough from each other that they do need to be learned separately. The name of the first version of the Syriac alphabet is the Estrangela script. This is the oldest script that was used to write Classical Syriac. The name of the second script is known as the Western script, which is also referred to as the Surto or Jacobite script, and this is the script that's primarily used in the Syrian Orthodox Church. And the name of the third script is the Eastern script, which is sometimes referred to as the Nestorian script, although that's definitely not the preferred term to be using for the Eastern script. And this is the script that traditionally has been used in the Church of the East. So if you take a look at the screen, we can see some of the differences that exist between the 3 different versions of the Syriac alphabet. So on the screen we have the first 3 letters of the Syriac alphabet in the Estrangela script, the Western script, and the Eastern script. And again, we'll be able to see that they are essentially the same alphabet, but they are variations that are big enough that they do need to be learned separately from each other. So in the first part, we have the Aleph in the Estrangela script, The Western version of Aleph is way different from what we see in the Estrangela script, and the Eastern version is different from what we have in the Estrangela version, but is much more similar to what we have in the Western script. The Beith is fairly similar as we go across in the Estrangela script to what we see in the Western script, but even there it's a little bit more rounded, and in the Eastern script it's fairly similar to what we have in the Estrangela script. And then we have the Gamel, which looks like this in the Estrangela script, but looks very different in the Western script. The Eastern script is quite similar to what we have in the Estrangela script, so we can see by taking a look at these letters, just the first 3 letters of the alphabet, that these letters are very, very similar to each other, but they're different enough from each other that they do need to be learned separately. So which of the 3 versions of the Syriac alphabet should you be learning? Well, my suggestion would be that you eventually learn all 3 versions of the Syriac alphabet. But as you begin the study of Classical Syriac, I would suggest focusing on the Estrangela version. And there are basically 2 reasons for that. The first reason has to do with the fact that the Estrangela version is much easier to learn. It's much easier to learn how to write letters in the Estrangela script, and it's much easier to read texts that are written in the Estrangela script. But there's another reason why I think it's important to focus on the Estrangela script, and that has to do with the fact that there are a number of important resources that are written and published using the Estrangela script. So a couple of examples, we have the Leiden Syriac Peshitta, which is the standard critical edition of the Old Testament in Syriac. We also have the Corpus Scriptorum series, which produces a number of important critical editions of works written in Classical Syriac. We also have Michael Sokolov's A Syriac Lexicon, which is a very important resource for translating Syriac texts into English. That being said, I also think it's important to at least be able to read on a basic level the Western script of the Syriac alphabet. And the main reason for that has to do with the fact that there are a number of important resources that are published using the Western script of the Syriac alphabet. And one of the most important resources written in the Western script of the Syriac alphabet is Payne Smith's A Compendious Syriac Dictionary. This is an essential tool for translating Syriac text into English. There's a lot more information in this dictionary compared to any other dictionary that there is of Classical Syriac in English. So it's very important to at least be able to read the Western script on a basic level to be able to access resources that are written in the Western script of the Syriac alphabet. A 5th important thing to know about the Syriac alphabet is that the Syriac alphabet in all 3 scripts is written from right to left. Let's take a look at an example that comes from Genesis chapter 1 and verse 1. This is what it says. Bereshith bara Allah yath Shemaya v'yath Ara. Notice the direction of the writing. Bereshith bara Allah yath Shemaya v'yath Ara. The direction of writing goes from right to left. Another important thing to notice when it comes to the direction of the writing for Classical Syriac is that when Classical Syriac letters have an opening, the opening usually goes to the left. Unlike English, whenever there is an opening in a letter written in the English alphabet, the opening usually goes to the right. So notice the examples that we have here. We have the Beith, which opens to the left, Beith as well, Beith in the other scripts, Gamal, same thing, and then we have the letter Pei as well, where we have the opening going to the left. And that's because of the direction of writing that we have for Classical Syriac, going from right to left. So the 6th important thing to know about the Syriac alphabet is that the Syriac alphabet in all 3 scripts is a semi-cursive script. And that means that for the most part, the letters of the Syriac alphabet can be attached either to the letter that comes before them or the letter that comes afterwards, sometimes to both as well. Although there are some letters that can only be attached to the letter that comes before, there are some letters that can only be attached to the letter that comes afterwards, and there are some letters that have to be written independently. So Classical Syriac is a semi-cursive script in all 3 scripts. Let's take a look at an example that we saw earlier. This is Genesis chapter 1 and verse 1. Notice in all 3 scripts, the letters for the most part are attached all to each other. Now that makes things a little bit more complicated when it comes comes to learning the alphabet, because not only do you have to learn the shape of the letter, you also have to know how they attach to the other letters of the Syriac alphabet, and which letters can be attached either to the letters that come before or the letters that come afterwards. So Classical Syriac in all three scripts is a semi-cursive script. Right, the seventh important thing to know about the Classical Syriac alphabet is that the Classical Syriac alphabet was originally written without a full system to represent the vowels. Now let's take a look at an example that comes from the free online grammar of Classical Syriac that's provided on my website, www.markfrancois.wordpress.com. This sentence has no vowels in it, but if we know English well, we should be able to figure out what it says. It says, "It is not impossible to read sentences in English without vowels." And when we add the vowels to it, we see that's exactly what the sentence says. It is not impossible to read sentences in English without vowels. You can see, of course, that it's very important to know English well to be able to insert the vowels properly. The exact same thing is true when it comes to Classical Syriac. Classical Syriac was originally written without a full system of vowels. There were two letters that could be used in some instances to represent vowels, but for the most part, Classical Syriac was written without a full system to represent vowels. So that meant that you would have to know Classical Syriac very well to be able to insert the vowels into the consonantal text as you are reading it. So let's take a look at one example. This is the example of the word medita. Medita. In this case, it has no vowels here, but because we know what the word medita is, we're able to insert those vowels ourselves. So the vowels that we have here, we have medi, an E sound, and then the ah sound that we have over here, and it ends up being pronounced medita, with the nu not being pronounced because of the hastener line that we have above it. But you have to know what the word is ahead of time to be able to know which vowels to attach to these consonants. Now, if you know Hebrew, you can be encouraged by the fact that it is much easier to do this in Classical Syriac than in Hebrew. The vowel patterns that we have in Classical Syriac are much more predictable than the vowel patterns that we have in Biblical Hebrew. So Classical Syriac was originally written without a full system of vowels. So the last important thing to know about the Syriac alphabet is that there are 22 letters in the Syriac alphabet. And in our next video, we're going to be taking a look at what each of these letters are and how to pronounce these letters properly. So those are 8 important things to know about the Syriac alphabet. And hopefully they've given us a better idea of what the Syriac alphabet is all about before we begin to learn the letters and how to pronounce them properly. If you would like access to the grammar that goes along with these videos, it's free online at www.markfrancois.wordpress.com under the Syriac Grammar tab. Thanks for watching.